Nope.
I don't enjoy going to church. Why don't I enjoy going to church?
Harry Potter was devil worship.
Religion is a fascinating human experiment that I think fulfills a lot of deep needs for a lot of people and can do a lot of good.
The first time I realized there was a crack in the foundation of religion.
Where the mind goes.
All right, buddy. I got a question for you. As someone who grew up in a deeply religious household, when was the first time you started to question religion?
There wasn't a first big moment. There were a lot of small questions that led to bigger questions that led to really big cracking questions.
Like a Russian nesting doll of questions.
Ooh, yes, just like a Russian nesting doll of questions. But honestly, that's actually a wonderful metaphor for it, which is that first little tiny nesting doll really probably came down to something as fundamental as, I don't enjoy going to church. Why don't I enjoy going to church? Right? I should enjoy going to do the thing that's the most important thing, to show up and be devoted to God. Well, so why don't I like it? Why do I dread Sundays? Why do I have anxiety every single Sunday of the week? Why is the worst day of my week Sunday? Right?
Yeah.
You see how this starts to, and then that cracks other things. Why, for me, does it seem when I look around that the religion I'm in hates gay people? And that's an extremism, right? A lot of people who are religious would be like, well, I don't hate gay people. I just don't agree with their choices. Sure. Okay. So why are there not a lot of people who are gay and openly gay and happy and loving themselves in that particular religion, right? I was raised Mormon. And I'm not anti-Mormon. I'm anti a lot of policies and philosophies and beliefs that Mormons promote. But I'm not anti people who are Mormon. I have family who are Mormon, who I love deeply and dearly. But I think there are beliefs that they hold that are harmful. And it was questioning and the cracking of those questions that started to peel away the layers of, am I actually a religious person, or have I just been doing that because that's what I've been taught since birth?
So I'm curious. I want to go back to the first thing you said about just hating going to church.
Okay.
What exactly was it about going to church that you didn't like?
I mean, I think some of it's just being a kid and you're bored at first, right? When you're, that was probably when I was between the ages of 8 and 12, right? You're just like, oh, I'm listening to someone talk about things that I don't understand or I don't care about, or I just want to color. I just want to play video games. And at the time when I was a kid, going to church as a Mormon, or as Mormons actually call themselves, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They don't really call themselves Mormons usually. That's the colloquial term.
Yeah, but that's way too much of a mouthful. Mormons is just rolls off the tongue.
People will just say LDS.
Better.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I say Mormon too. Most Mormons I hear call themselves Mormons because it's easier, but just honoring that is not actually how the Mormon Church wants to refer to itself. They want to refer to themselves as Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But it was 3 hours long. Plus, every Tuesday or Wednesday, you would go to young men or young women's, and you would do activities. Plus, then sometimes there are other duties that you do in addition, like collecting tithing or things as you get older, right? And so it's a long period of time and a lot of investment.
But so is school. So what's the difference? What made you feel specifically that church was the thing you hated?
Because, I mean, let's be honest, sometimes I also hated going to school like every other human being, right?
Sure.
So that's real. I think it was when disliking going to church became about the way I felt being around people at church and what I perceived as judgment and control of my life, not just at church, but everywhere, right? Things down to, my experience. I can't speak for everyone's experience growing up in the Mormon Church, but for me, I was taught and trained that masturbation was sinful and was a slippery slope to more evil, sinful decisions like sex before marriage, or maybe even becoming gay, right? Like, if you touch yourself, you'll become gay, which now I'm just like, that's a load of shit. But those are beliefs that people hold, and they teach you, and so then you have a warped, in my opinion, warped sense of like your own sexuality because of that brainwashing. Yeah.
It's almost like it wasn't necessarily church or the location or even the time. Because I mean, first of all, 3 hours a Sunday. Oh my
It's a
God.
lot of time.
I thought an hour was bad. Every church I grew up going to was an hour door to door.
I mean, and that's more what LDS church is now.
Okay.
They've shifted that.
So, but even then, it was a long time. It seems as if it wasn't necessarily church, but more about what church represented and the beliefs.
At first,
okay,
those were the first cracks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As your younger brain.
Yep.
But then, as I became a teenager, it came down to like, do I believe that, God lives on a planet called Kolob? Which you're looking at me like I'm crazy, but that is part of the Mormon theology, is that God is a real entity and being that lives on another planet in the universe, right? And that's the most common things that people bring up because it sounds crazy when you say it. If you look into almost any major religion and you go deep enough, you're going to hear stuff that's going to raise someone's eyebrows if they're not in the church. But again, we're picking on Mormonism because I grew up Mormon, but
we'll pick on Christianity after this. Don't worry, I got some
perfect.
stories.
All right. Well, and here's another one, right? A lot of people don't believe. Basically, if you're not Mormon, like, do you view Mormons as Christians?
I don't know. I don't.
Most
I
people
don't think
say
so.
no. Most
I don't
Christians
think so.
I've met are like,
Yeah.
Mormons are not Christian.
Yeah.
Mormons consider, at least the Mormons I know and the way I was raised, consider themselves Christian. They study and believe in Christ's gospel. That's probably one of the most common things spoken about within the Mormon church. There's just so many absurdities when I look back on my upbringing that I just believed in because that was all I knew, right? And now I think for me, when I zoom out even just beyond Mormonism or even beyond Christianity, for me, religion is a fascinating human experiment that I think fulfills a lot of deep needs for a lot of people and can do a lot of good, and also does some fucked up shit, both to people on an individual level and collectively. And I have very mixed feelings about religion as a concept. But what do you think? I mean, I know you were raised religious as well.
So I've told you this story before. I think I even told you this on a podcast a while ago. But the first time I realized there was maybe just a crack or in the foundation of religion for me. I grew up Christian, but I grew up what you would call non-denominational Christian.
Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because I don't have that experience.
It basically means that your church had a rock band that would open up for it.
Okay.
It's kind of, and the snacks were a lot better. Non-denominational means it doesn't fall in a specific bucket. We weren't Catholic. We weren't Baptist. We weren't Protestant.
You're more what you aren't than what you are?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It's almost self-explanatory, but there is not a specific denomination of Christianity. You learn about the Bible. You learn about the Old Testament, the New Testament. It was welcoming. It was a little bit more fun. The music was better. But the first time I realized the music actually was pretty good. Not gonna lie, dude. Some Christian rock, dude. Christian rock drummers are some of the best.
Okay,
drummers.
that I will get on board with. A few times, even though I'm not into Christian rock at all, I've heard some of those drum lines, and I'm like, oh.
The first crack that I had though was when I was in 3rd grade, and our church started preaching about how Harry Potter was devil worship.
Remember this story? I remember Barnes and Noble having piles and piles of books that were like, Harry Potter is the devil and evil, and here's my 500-page, rant on how.
Exactly. And my parents basically pulled me aside and they're like, hey, this part isn't true. The rest of it's true, but just this part isn't. And I was like, just this part? Right? Like, well, how did just this part sneak in, right? That was the first time I was like, okay, so not everything is 100% true. And the second time was when I started questioning my dad on biblical stories.
Interesting.
Right? Because there's all these stories of, just the most incredible things happening, right? Jesus turning water into wine, making laymen walk, great floods that destroyed the earth, people that went through some of the hardest tribulations. I mean, I can pull pretty, deep quote stories from the Bible still to this day. But I remember him pulling me aside one day and going, "Hey, not all of these are true. Some of these are stories. Some of these are ideas. Some of these are lessons. Um, Not all of them happened verbatim, word for word, exactly like they happened. They're more like parables."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, you mean like nursery rhymes?" And he was like, "Kinda." And I was like, "Huh." And it just started getting me thinking, okay, so not everything is true. Some are these are just lessons. So what exactly is religion, right?
Mm.
And
What a
really,
question.
yeah, and really what this kind of took me to is religion is in the eye of the beholder. Religion is,
Okay.
at least to me, it's what you take from it. It's not a do this and you'll get into heaven, don't do this and you'll go to hell. It's more like, hey, um, we all want to be better people, right? Here's a way to be a better person. And that clicked for me because I was like, okay, I get that. Doesn't mean that everything is right. It doesn't mean this is the only way to do it, but it is one way to do it. And fast forward all these years later, I mean, I go to church now on Easter and Christmas Eve with my wife's family because they're Catholic and that's important to them.
That's kind of beautiful.
I kind of like it, honestly.
Yeah.
They call
Ritual is beautiful.
they call us Creasters, Christmas and Easter.
Okay.
So we're
Yeah,
Creasters.
nice.
And at the end of the day, I don't necessarily do it for me. I do it for my wife's family, but I still enjoy it. Um, all that being said, as I've gotten older, I have found myself gravitating towards other aspects of life that have still helped me become a better person. And one of those for me is philosophy. So,
Okay.
you know this about me, but I am really big into stoicism.
Yeah.
I love stoicism. I love stoicism because it's pretty simple, it's very straightforward, and it's all about how do you make yourself a better person
Mm.
despite whatever else is happening in the world around you. And as I've gotten older, I've found so many correlations between philosophy and stoicism specifically, but philosophy as a whole and religion. And I've started to just kind of make these connections um, about different practices that span across, philosophy, religion, and then even science a bit as well. And it's kind of gotten me to this point where I'm starting to realize that, and I hope, maybe this upsets someone who's deeply religious, but it doesn't really matter if you're religious, if you're philosophical, if you're science based, as long as you're using that to help yourself become a better person and navigate and understand the world around you, then we're all kind of doing the same thing. And the thing that really stood out to me, and the practice that stood out to me, that tied a lot of these together, is the idea of meditation,
Mm.
the idea of breath work, and then the idea of prayer. Right? Meditation is very philosophical. It's very spiritual. It's very insightful.
For some, it's religious almost,
It,
but
it
not for
is.
everybody.
Sure,
Right?
sure. Religious in the term of you do it religiously. But when you think about meditation in the aspect or in the lens of religion, it's called prayer, right?
Mm.
It's you are.
Well, but for like Buddhists, for example, like meditation is part of that, and it's called meditation, right?
Sure.
So,
Okay. Actually, good point.
yeah,
Yes, very good point. So meditation in a religious aspect as well, but it's doing so for the benefits that the religion gives you to bring you closer to your God, to make you a better person, to help you understand yourself better in the eyes of your God. Meditation is the same thing. It's making yourself a better person in the eyes of yourself. You're turning the lens from this ethereal being to
Mm.
yourself and going, I'm still practicing the same thing. And even when it comes to prayer, right? This idea of thinking and meditating on a specific idea and wanting something to happen. I mean, what's the difference between manifestation and prayer if you really think about it?
Yes, I have thought similar things as well. I think there's something powerful there, and I think it goes to there seem to be these reoccurring patterns in human behavior that come from maybe different value sets, that come from different reasons, but they're really not that different at the
Mm-mm.
core, and it's fascinating.
I saw this interesting reel on Instagram the other day that was talking about the benefit of doing 30 seconds to a minute of breath work and pausing before you eat.
Huh.
And the idea was a lot of times we move into eating in a very from a very sympathetic nervous system perspective, meaning fight or flight. We're pressed for time. We're shoveling food. We're not really conscious of what we're doing. We're on our phones. We're not paying attention. And all of a sudden, we're just done eating. Right? It's not a very mindful thing. And they were saying that it actually aids in insulin sensitivity and
Hmm.
aids in digestion to just eat slower, to be thoughtful with your eating, and to take a pause, take 5 big deep breaths before, and really just kind of think about the food. Maybe even just be grateful for the fact that you're able to eat. And I was like, oh, that just sounds like prayer, right? That's basically
I
just
mean, I was raised with prayer, and I would agree.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very
right.
similar.
It's the same thing, and whether you're doing it to thank God for the food that you're about to eat, or you're doing it for the psychological and physical benefits and the aid in digestion and the mindfulness practice and the challenge of like doesn't matter what you're doing. Science says take a break and pause before eating. Religion says take a break and pause before eating.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's just being done from a different reason, a different lens, and that was very eye opening for me because at the end of the day, I think people get themselves wrapped up in am I doing these things for the right reasons? Am I doing this so I can get into heaven? Am I doing this so I can lose weight? Am I doing this to insert valid reason why here? But at the end of the day, the what you're doing doesn't necessarily change, and I think
Mm.
that's really cool. I think there's other aspects of religion and philosophy that can be applied in this context as well. One of them just being the understanding of like this, search for knowledge and the search for meaning of why we're here, right? I mean, the very clear example, right, is the difference between creationism and the idea that we were created by a god or a greater being, and the Big Bang Theory, right? And people think about those things as two opposite sides of the coin, but they only do that because the Bible says that the earth was created in 7 days, and on day one God created the earth, and on day two He created the animals, and on day three, whatever, right? Is that a story that was told? Was it actually done in 7 days, or is that the biblical story of the Big Bang? Is the 7 days referencing the 18 or 300 million years or whatever? And I'm not versed in exactly how long ago the Big Bang is reported to be, but is the Bible just telling the story of the Big Bang? It's not one or the other. Could it be both? Right? That to me was something that I've kind of sat on and go like, yeah, maybe they're both saying the same thing. One's just telling the scientific, documented evidence that we have based off of carbon dating and things that we know about this world, and the other one's based off a story that people well before we understood, carbon dating or how long the world was here, they created to explain how we got to where we are today. And that just to me was very maybe just take a step back and go, okay, maybe we're both talking about the same thing here.
Mm.
Maybe it's not this or that. Maybe it's that and this.
Yeah, I think when I fully shed my worldview being based in religion, and particularly the Mormon or LDS religion and their views, I then was seeking, well, what is my view of the world, right? I think we all, on some level, have built up the lens with which we view the world, right? We all have to have one to operate, right? Some are given that lens and they keep it through their life. Some, like me, are given a lens, discard it, and have to build a new one. And I'm sure there's even another way that lenses are built, right? For me, where I ended up arriving, and probably some of this comes from the fact that I was raised by storytellers, is that I will never know what the real lens is. I don't think there is a human in the world that has the correct lens of how the world works or why it came to be or what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to show up and what comes after death, right? Nobody has it. We all have different splinters, and there are splinters of truth that I think each of us kind of holds. And there is a philosophy, it's not a religion, but it's a philosophy that I think best describes my fundamental worldview, which is called absurdism. Have you ever heard of absurdism?
No, I haven't.
There are different absurdist writers that explored, expanded on, and shaped the philosophy of absurdism. And I don't think I subscribe 100% to how some of those philosophers described it, but I've taken from it and used it to build my own, which is that because I will never know or hold that 100% accurate true lens, I can't know anything. The idea of knowing is a fundamentally impossible task for a human being, true knowing, in my opinion. What then? And absurdism is really a sidestep away from nihilism.
Interesting.
And in fact, there were a lot of folks who started as nihilists and then go, well, what do I do with that? And then moved into absurdism, which is you could arrive at this acceptance of never knowing and go into this place, well, then nothing matters, right? It's a very easy step to take next.
Yeah, that is nihilism. In a
Exactly.
nutshell.
That's nihilism, right? And I think, I do not identify as an atheist, but I have a lot of beautiful atheist friends who have tremendous purpose and morality and are some of the most powerful activists that I know. And I think a lot of folks look at them and go, well, how can you be an atheist and not be a nihilist? Right? And to me, this is the power of absurdism, is the sidestep away from nihilism is to then say, if I can't know, then I have to, and I don't want to go into nothing matters, nihilism, I have to create my own purpose. I get to craft my own lens from whatever I want. And so that is how I view the world, is I get to intentionally create my worldview. And it's always evolving, right? I get to create purpose and meaning for myself. And when I sit in that truly, right? And I'm human, I'm flawed, I go off in judgmental directions, but when I really sit in that knowing, then when I look at somebody else like you, who views the world fundamentally different than me, has a different lens, it's not better than mine, because neither of us know. It's just different. And that's beautiful. And that's how, honestly, I came to terms with the fact that I could still love my stepmom and my father, who are still very religious. Sometimes they're in their own exploration of their worldview, but we have very different views about a lot of things. And I struggled for so long. How could my father, who is my dad, believe in something that caused me harm? And what I came to through absurdism was it saved his life. I mean, my dad was a suicidal person who tried to kill himself. And he believes that Mormonism and the LDS faith is part of, and God really is what helped him move beyond that deep depression and reclaim his life. And I'm grateful for that. In that, I am grateful to Mormonism and religion, because it saved my father. I mean, and I would have been born. So there's an absurdity to all of that, right? But I think it's beautiful.
And it almost doesn't matter if it was Mormonism, if it was Christianity, if it was Stoicism, if it was absurdism, or if it was science that caused him to have a belief shift that he did. It's the point that he had it. And kind of going back to how we started this conversation, cool. If your way of being a better person is through religion, then more power to you. If your way of being a better person is through philosophy, then again, more power to you. And if you're a science-based person who goes, hey, philosophy is bullshit and religion never happened, because how could, the entire earth have been wiped out by a giant flood, and how could one person save two of every animal, and how could they have gotten animals that were already on the other side of the world? Like, okay, we get it. There's a hole in this story here. But at the end of the day, if it helps you become a better person and you're not applying a lens that says everyone has to think the same way I do or else they're wrong, then in my opinion, more power to you, right? Who cares if it's Stoicism or if it's Mormonism? It's the fact that you found something that says, hey, I'm going to help myself become a better person and maybe make the people around me better people as well. Then we're all kind of marching to the same beat, right? It's this idea that, hey, we're all trying to be better people, and doesn't matter how we get there, we have to respect and acknowledge that there's many different ways to get to that place. And I think it's just beautiful. And whether you pause before you eat to thank God, whether you pause before you eat to shift into a parasympathetic nervous system, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that we're pausing and we're being conscious and we're giving gratitude and we're giving thanks. to God, to ourselves, to luck, to whatever, the spaghetti monster. Have you ever heard of Pastafarianism? That'll be for another podcast, but it doesn't matter.
I have.
Right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to become better people. And I think religion, philosophy, and science can all help you do that.
Where the mind goes.